We're here to run through every single fantasy relevant wide receiver in week 12, and we're going to throw them into one of 5 categories, all right? We're going to throw them into a must start, a strong start, a dub flex, L flex, or a must sit. So hopefully this helps y'all make your sit start decisions for the week 12 games, all right? Wide receiver edition. We did the running backs yesterday, so go check that out if you have not already. It will be linked in the description. Let's jump into Thursday Night Football. The game tonight, we've got Pittsburgh in Cleveland on the road. 3.5-point favorites Pittsburgh is. 37-point total, all right? The weather, as I've kind of yelled at you guys about already this week multiple times, the weather is supposed to be pretty strong here. Some snow, some rain, some low 30s temperature, some winds 15, 20, 25 miles per hour. So it's going to get pretty ugly out there. So we don't expect a lot of passing production here. However, we do expect Russell Wilson to throw for 1 single yard, maybe a little bit more than that, all right? If Russell Wilson throws for 1 yard tonight, you win your bet on Underdog Fantasy, okay? If you are new to Underdog, you download the app, you use code BDGE. Your first time depositing, you're going to get a deposit bonus, plus you're going to get this free square of Russell Wilson to throw for half a passing yard tonight, all right? When we look at the actual pass catchers in this game, we have pretty much just George Pickens, all right? He's been popping off recently. The matchup is a little bit tough, though. We had Denzel Ward, we had Greg Newsome, both a little bit banged up, but both got to a full practice by Wednesday. So they will be at full strength in terms of the passing defense for the Cleveland Browns. Now, with Pickens, I think he's just been too good. I don't want to overthink this one. If you have him, you're putting him into your lineup. His over-under on Underdog, you could obviously do player picks there, is 59.5 for receiving yards, which is lower than it's been in the last couple of weeks, mainly because of the weather. So I do think there is some bust potential here for George Pickens for as well as he's been playing. So I'm not going to throw him into the must start because of the weather. I'm going to throw him into the strong start category. On the flip side of things, I mean, we've got every pass catcher in Cleveland getting a shitload of targets on a week-to-week basis. Because of the weather and because of the way that they have just been shuffling around targets, I'm going to throw Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore all into the dub flex category. I don't know that I feel overly optimistic about any of them in this weather against a really tough defense in Pittsburgh. Jameis Winston has thrown the ball over 40 times, 45 times in all of his starts so far this year. I don't see that happening tonight. Maybe they have to get in comeback mode, but I just imagine this is a very low-scoring, scrappy game. They're gonna get Nick Chubb the ball. They're gonna get Jerome Ford the ball. They're gonna try to keep the ball on the ground as much as they can and avoid turnovers for Jameis Winston. So I think Tillman's a dub flex. I think Judy's been hot, so he's a dub flex. Elijah Moore, I don't see a ceiling game here outcome for him. I kind of feel like his floor play of like 6 for 50 is probably his best case scenario here. So I'd lean Elijah Moore being in between the dub flex and L flex category. If you can go elsewhere, I probably would. So I'm actually going to ultimately throw him into the L flex category. Moving on, we've got Minnesota and Chicago. Minnesota minus 3.5 points on the road in Chicago, 39-point total. Both pass defenses are very strong. Minnesota sends a blitz at a high rate. Chicago's coming off of like a good game because they switched their OC, but it wasn't really that great statistically. They just played a little bit better. Minnesota wide receivers, Justin Jefferson's obviously a must start. I think Jordan Addison getting his swing back a little bit. I still think I lean more towards him being an L flex than I do a dub flex. I think he's borderline top 36 wide receiver, but maybe closer to that 40 range. Like, he did have a good game last game because he broke out for a big play, but more often than not, he's not getting a lot of targets. Jefferson's eating targets up. TJ Hawkinson's getting healthier and getting more targets. I think he's an L flex, to be honest with you. No one else is startable on the Minnesota pass catching group. For Chicago, I mean, I think I would throw almost all these players into the L flex category as well. Despite having like a good game last week, I have no trust in DJ Moore, Rome, or Keenan Allen. If I had to lean one way or another, like I had to rank these guys, I think DJ Moore and Rome could fall into the dub flex category. Keenan Allen definitely still kind of floating in that L flex category. I don't trust that the Chicago offense's success is going to keep up or be something that is repetitive week over week over week. Minnesota, just a tough pass defense in general. Again, I think they're going to cause problems for Caleb Williams, who holds on to the ball for too long, and that's not a good thing if you are playing against a blitzing defense. Also, again, like a sub 40-point total. Don't expect much in this game. Moving over to Tampa Bay and the New York Giants. Tampa Bay on the road in New York, 6-point favorites, 41-point total. For Tampa Bay, you have Mike Evans returning. If he returns, you're obviously starting him. He's a must start against this incredibly soft Giants defense. So he goes straight into must start. There hasn't been a pass catcher emerge. It's kind of crazy. Like Evans and Godwin have missed so much time. Cade Otton's been the only pass catching weapon outside of the running backs that has emerged whatsoever. So every other name that you have in mind, Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan, goes into the sit category. For New York, we have Malik Neighbors, who has struggled mightily over the last month of the season in terms of having some sort of ceiling play. Tommy DeVito is under center. I still think regardless, though, the target share is very high. This matchup is incredible. Tampa Bay is 28th in terms of EPA per pass and 28th in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. So Malik is still going to end up being in the strong start category for me. Wan'Dale Robinson, I think you could talk yourself into – I'm going to put him into the dub flex category. This feels like a PPR day for him where they're going to have to play catch-up. They're going to have to throw the ball a decent amount. Love the matchup against Tampa Bay secondary. So we're going to put Wan'Dale into the dub flex category. Moving down the list, we've got New England and Miami. New England is in Miami. Miami is 7.5-point favorite. So more than a touchdown now, 46-point total. We have the Patriots with Drake May slinging the ball a little bit. And the guys that you should kind of have your eye on, I suppose, I think Demario Douglas in this matchup. This is a Miami defense ranked 25th in terms of coverage rank per PFF, 20th in EPA per pass. So not a very, very strong defense. And this will be a game where I think there's going to have to be points put up here. And Drake May is going to have to throw the ball a decent amount. So I think Demario Douglas could be a dub flex for you. Hunter Henry's obviously being started. This is not a tight end video. Behind him, Kayshon Boutte's gotten 6 targets in like 4 straight games, but he's done nothing with them. So he's going to be far more of an L flex / must sit player for me. I don't think there's anyone else that you can trust in that Patriots passing offense. For Miami, things get interesting here. Listen, I know Tyreek Hill has not been Tyreek Hill, but he's still a must start. Jalen Waddle, it is a good matchup, and I think the Patriots will focus on shutting down Tyreek Hill. So I do think you could talk yourself into Jalen Waddle being in the dub flex category despite how he's performed up to this point. I mean, the matchups are just so good week over week over week. It is hard to talk yourself out of starting Jalen Waddle if you have him. So you have the luxury of starting other players over him. You could probably do that. But given the matchup, given the point spread, given the total, given the game script I think is going to happen here, I'm going to say Jalen Waddle is in the dub flex category. Tennessee, Houston. We've got Tennessee as 8-point dogs on the road in Houston. 40.5-point total here. Very low scoring projection. For Tennessee, the only dude you're even really thinking about is Calvin Ridley. He is, based on the target shares that he's gotten, based on the production he's had over the last month or so since D-Hop is gone, he's a must start. Like, I couldn't imagine sitting him at this point. You know, it doesn't feel like he should be in the must-start category, but he's going to go right up in there for me because he's been seeing about 38% of the targets since D-Hop has left. Nick Westbrook-Akini is coming off of a 98-yard touchdown game. He's scored a bunch of touchdowns this year. That's extremely hard to rely on week over week. So Nick Westbrook-Akini, while he is involved, I still think because this is going to be a low-scoring, scrappy game, I see very, very little ceiling for him. I'm going to throw him into the L-Flex category, even though I bet a bunch of y'all probably drop some waiver fab on him. I'm not excited about Nick Westbrook-Akini. For Houston, the only 2 names to really cover here are Nico Collins, must start, of course, would have had an enormous game if that first 80-yard touchdown didn't get called back immediately. And then you have Tank Dell, who has been extremely mediocre. Like 90% of his games so far this year have been under 60 yards, like hasn't really shown a ceiling. I think the matchup is okay. Tennessee has started off the week with a lot of banged up players right now. They had 3 of their top cornerbacks as DNPs on Wednesday. So if their, entire secondary is cooked right now, I think you can make the case that Tank Dell could have a little bit of an explosion game if Tennessee decides to really zone in on Nico. So you could talk yourself into Tank Dell. I'm actually going to throw him into the L-Flex category. The dude has just not been producing this year. I could see a game script like this where it's a 40-point total, Houston dominating, giving Joe Mixon another 25, 30 touches, just controlling the time of possession through slow, methodical, move the clock, move the chains type of ball there. So KC, Carolina. We got KC minus 11 on the road in Carolina, 43-point total. KC should dominate on the ground here. If Pacheco is back, him and Kareem Hunt should get a ton of work here. Now, what are we doing with the wide receivers in Kansas City? I think D-Hop goes right back to being a strong start, despite being a little bit of a letdown the last few weeks. I think it was just a little bit more game plan specific, but they're going to be able to do whatever they want to Carolina. This is a full-on bondage game here for the Kansas City Chiefs offense. We did see Xavier Worthy get a lot more involved in the first half of last game. There were some reports right before the game started that they were going to look to get him a lot more involved. He's also, he's been wildly disappointing. Very rarely produces for you on a week-by-week basis. He's had 3 plays that if they were an inch this way, half a foot that way, we'd probably be looking at his fantasy finishes quite a bit differently. So I think based off of the momentum of last week, I'm actually going to throw Zave into the dub flex category. I'm going to throw D-Hop into the strong start. We're going to throw every other receiver, Juju, Justin Watson, whatever, into the must-sit category. Carolina, they've got a lot of players that we kind of need to talk through. Ultimately, this is a tough defense to really do anything against. Kansas City, their coverage rank is 14. Their fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position is number 10. I think they're just going to be able to pin their ears back and just get to Bryce Young whenever they want to. Bryce Young is averaging about 170 passing yards a game, which is not great to spread out because we do expect Adam Thielen to be back. We do expect Jonathan Brooks to be back. So you have Coker, you have Thielen, you have Xavier Legette. The way I'm looking at this, I think they're all L flex. I don't feel comfortable having Coker. I don't feel comfortable having Legette. I don't feel comfortable having Thielen in my lineup at all. And I kind of like doing the tiers this way more than I like doing rankings, right? Because if you're doing rankings, Legette might end up being, because there are 6 teams on bye, he might end up being my wide receiver 36. You're oh, you have him ranked as a wide receiver 3. But doing it more so tier-based this way lets you know, sure, he might be the wide receiver 36 and Thielen might be the wide receiver 47, but they both fall into the L flex category for me. Sure, one of these guys might catch 5 passes for 60 yards and be the lucky one that scores a touchdown, but trying to guess who that is against this tough defense is not something I'm trying to do here. So I'm going to throw all of the Carolina pass catchers into the L flex category. And on that note, if I had to rank them, I still think I'd go Legette 1. Adam Thielen is still limited. He has not gotten a full practice in yet. I'm not really sure what his deal is, what his status is, if he's going to be a full go. If he does get full practices in on Thursday, Friday, I'll probably throw him in as the 1 above these other young wide receivers in full PPR leagues, but I think Legette has more touchdown upside. Coker is a fun story, but I think when the wide receiver room gets messy, you have to go for the guys that have the highest, fantasy value. So that's volume, Thielen, it's touchdown upside, Legette. Moving on, we got Dallas, we got Washington. Washington, 10.5 point favorites at home, 45.5 point total. Obviously, Dallas can just be had in any way that their opponents want them. Pause again. But for Dallas, we look at the pass catching group. CeeDee Lamb, we'll just throw him into the strong start category. Obviously, Washington is a defense that you can throw the ball on. CeeDee's going to get very involved, get a very high target share. Other than that, everybody on the Dallas receiving group gets thrown into the must-sit category. For Washington, I think we could put Terry into must-start category for sure. Sure, he had one down game, but he was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver up to that point in the season. Great matchup against Dallas. And then you have Noah Brown, where I think you could do worse. I'm not going to put him into the dub flex category, but it wouldn't surprise me if he had a good game because Noah Brown is running all the routes. I'm going to throw him into the L flex category because I'd rather not play him, obviously. But again, I think you could probably do worse than Noah Brown based on matchup, based on route participation, based on the fact that I think Jaden Daniels is finally going to be 90% healthy for the first time since injuring his ribs based off having this 10-day period now, him being able to run a little bit more, him being able to keep the chains moving, him being able to operate this offense a little more smoothly and take shots downfield to a guy like Noah Brown. So Noah Brown, I almost talked myself into putting him in the dub flex category, but I'm still going to throw him into the L flex. Moving to Detroit and Indy. We have Detroit 7.5 point favorites on the road in Indy, 50.5 point total here. So 2 juggernauts right now. Indy ain't a juggernaut, but the point total says that it might be. So Detroit, again, underlying metrics, coverage ranks, number 3 in the NFL per PFF, EPA per pass rank, number 1 in the NFL, fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position, 29. The problem is they don't get really any pressure against the quarterbacks anymore now that they've had all these injuries. They have 3, 4, 5 starters that are going to be out for this game on the defensive side of the ball, which is big for Indy, which is big for those pass catchers. And I saw Josh Norris from Underdog tweet out today that over the last 2 weeks, or the last 2 games that Josh Downs has played with Anthony Richardson, he's been the wide receiver 4 and the wide receiver 11. So people worried about him, I wouldn't be overly worried, man. I think Josh Downs just continues to get it done one way or another. So if we start with Indy, I think that Josh Downs is a strong start. I think that Alec Pierce is actually a dub flex based on the high point total, based on a Rich probably needing to take shots in this game. And a lot of them go to Alec Pierce. So I'm going to say Josh Downs, strong start. Alec Pierce, dub flex. Michael Pittman is an L flex for me. I don't know. I don't really want anything to do with Michael Pittman and his fucking bacchiotomy out there. For Detroit, Amon-Ra is obviously a must start. Behind him, I think J-Mo's a good start. I'd put J-Mo into the dub flex category. Not exactly like a must start or strong start, but of course he just gives you big games. He gives you low floor games, but you know what you're getting from J-Mo more often than not in terms of like his range of outcomes. So if you need some upside, he's the guy for you, which is why he fits perfectly into like a flex spot. Moving down, we got Denver and we've got Las Vegas. Denver -6, 41-point total here. Las Vegas is terrible against the pass. Las Vegas is also dealing with a lot of injuries at the cornerback position. 3 of their starters were DNPs on Wednesday, so do not be surprised. This was why I was so high on Bo Nix last week. When they played the Falcons, Atlanta had 3 of their top 4 cornerbacks out for this game, then lost one in-game as well. If Las Vegas has the same setup, you should imagine Bo Nix is probably going to have a similar. Obviously, the pass rush in LV is much better than Atlanta with Max Crosby, etc., but with the secondary banged up the way it is, already not a good secondary to begin with, Bo Nix should be able to do whatever he wants here. So when you look at a guy like Courtland Sutton, he's damn near a must start. I'll throw him into the strong start category because, whatever. But I think he's as close to being in the must start category as anyone in the strong start category. Behind him, it's crazy how well Bo Nix has played in like his passing production, passing touchdowns. You can't trust like a single other player in that receiving group. Devon Vele, Lil Jordan Humphrey, like tight ends get involved every once in a while. You can't trust anybody to really. It's like a very bad version of Cleveland right now. But Courtland Sutton gets it done every time Bo Nix gets it done. So everybody else to me is an L flex and probably more so of a must sit in the Denver receiving core out there. For the Raiders, we have another game with Gardner Minshew under center, which obviously makes Brock Bowers a GOAT. An incredibly tough matchup versus Denver. So you have Jacoby Myers, who will get a high target share, but I think in this matchup, in this environment, he's going to end up being an L flex for me based on the matchup, and no one else is even there to be considered for Vegas. San Fran and Green Bay, 1.5 point favorites. Green Bay is at home, 47.5 point total. Now, here's where I sit with Green Bay. Green Bay, I think people are starting to sleep on Green Bay because they had last week's game where they played in Chicago. It was a sloppy game. The weather was not dialed up for a passing game. If you remember, they had their bye before that, and then the game before that, do you remember Jordan Love with his groin slipping all over the place? It was really bad weather again. So basically in a 3-week stretch, we've seen 2 really bad weather games, one which was Jordan Love badly injured with the groin and a bye week. So we have almost a month period of people like just remembering Green Bay kind of being bad or underwhelming. This to me screams massive bounce back for the Green Bay passing game, okay? In Green Bay at home versus a very, very banged up San Fran defense. A lot of DMPs on Wednesday, Nick Bosa being one of them. I think this is an explosion game for the Packers receiving group. So I would go as far as probably throwing Jaden Reed into the strong start, if not must start. We'll go strong start for Jaden Reed. For Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, they're both going to get into the dub flex play for me. And then Dontavian Wicks, he's not getting enough run right now, so he's going to be an L flex because I think he does give you kind of like game-breaking upside. He can catch a deep pass and really hit some home run speed there for you, but overall, like you definitely don't want to start him if you don't have to. For San Francisco, this could be another great game for Jawan Jennings. He's going to go into the must-start category for me. Jair Alexander, another DNP on Wednesday, so there's a possibility that Green Bay does not have Jair Alexander, the best cover corner, obviously. Jawan's a must-start for me. Debo, something's obviously looked very, very off with him. I still think you got to roll him out here. We'll throw him into the dub flex category because the production is not there. He's one of the stronger dub flexes, obviously, because it's Debo fucking Samuel, and he can get it done on any given day. But clearly, I think there's something hampering him here, or like something weird is going on with Debo. I still think you have to roll him out week after week after week. So he's going to be a dub flex for me. Ricky Pearsall. Ricky P, I think no one's going to want to start him this week because he's coming off of his worst game by far, but I like the matchup. I like the game environment here. It should be a lot of passing. It should be a lot of scoring going on here. Last week, he didn't really get targeted, didn't catch passes, but the 3 weeks prior to that, his target shares were still hovering around like 18% in all 3 weeks. It was relatively consistent. And if Jair Alexander's gone, that's like a domino effect where now, the number one receiver gets a much worse cornerback, and so on and so forth. So I think Ricky P, you could talk yourself into him being a dub flex. I'm going to throw him into the L flex category, but he's not a must sit for me. Out of that game, we're going to move to Arizona and Seattle. For Arizona, we have Marvin Harrison Jr. Going against the Seahawks secondary, which is a good secondary, but they're only 1-point favorites at home, 47.5-point over-under, so expected a pretty high-scoring affair here. Marvin Harrison Jr., inconsistent pretty much all year, but he does have ceiling games, so we're going to put him into the strong start category. We're going to put Michael Wilson into the L flex category, and that's going to be all for that. Seattle, we're going to throw DK into the must start category. We're going to throw JSN. I still don't know what to make out of him. I think based on the way that he's producing recently, though, he's going to go into the strong start category. There's part of me that wants to throw him into dub flex, but after last week's game, seeing another 10-plus targets, catching another 10-plus passes, he's now done it with DK Metcalf back in the lineup, which was kind of surprising, but they're using him a lot better. His ADOT is above 8 right now, which it wasn't in the beginning of the year when DK Metcalf was on the field. So he's being utilized a lot more in a fantasy-friendly way, and he just looks a lot more explosive. So we might be in the midst of that breakout for JSN right now. So he's going to be a strong start for me. Lockett's going to be an L flex. He's kind of floated away. He has had huge games against Arizona in the past, but it does seem like he's now completely taking a backseat to JSN. Philly, Los Angeles Rams, 2.5-point favorites for Philadelphia, 49-point total in this one in LA. This is another one that could be high scoring. It could be one where Philly just goes extremely run heavy again, though, and that would be a little bit scary because Philly's defense on the other side of things, their coverage rank per PFF is number 1 in the NFL. EPA per pass, number 6. Fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver, number 6 as well. So getting an immovable object, unstoppable force, that kind of shit here with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, those kind of guys. Obviously, when it comes to the Rams receivers, Kupp and Puka both need to be in your lineup. They're both must-starts. Their ceiling games are insane, and you can never really predict a bad game for either of them the way that they soak up 60 to 70% of this team's targets. On the flip side, Philly, you're obviously not sitting A.J. Brown against a soft Rams secondary. Obviously, just the run volume is super concerning for both him and Devonta Smith. I think Devonta Smith probably moves more into the dub flex category than does the strong start category. Any given game, he can blow up because he's so talented. But right now, he's really not seeing that many targets, and they're just not throwing it enough for him to be warranted as a top 15 fantasy wide receiver. Moving down, we got Baltimore and we got the Chargers. So Baltimore, 2.5-point favorites on the road in LA, 51-point total. Now, two opposites here. The Chargers defense, really good. Baltimore's pass defense, very bad. The single most fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. I think Ladd McConkey is an extremely strong start in this one. I think Quentin Johnson has been getting it done week over week. He's going to fall right into the dub flex category for me. Herbert's looked incredible. Both of those guys have looked really, really good and very, very strong pass catchers for Herbert and really elevating this offense totally. For Baltimore, Zay Flowers, don't really care that he's had down games. He's a must start for me immediately. It's crazy. In a 51-point total, I still don't really feel good about anybody else behind Zay Flowers. We did see Deontay Johnson get a few more snaps than he did previously. Rashad Bateman's played well, but he's very inconsistent. So I think everybody else, Deonta, Rashad Bateman, all those guys fall right into the L flex category. I'd put Bateman as an L flex. I'd put Deontay Johnson as a must sit. For as good as Baltimore's passing offense has been, it's a lot of the tight ends. It's likely it's Mark Andrews, it's Zay Flowers, and then it's, fucking Derrick Henry feasting on a weekly basis. So that's going to wrap up the wide receiver preview for this week, week 12. Good luck to y'all. I know we're fighting for playoffs out here. If you are fighting to pay rent, you know what to do. Go to Underdog Fantasy. Go grab Russell Wilson's 1 passing yard line up there right now. When you download, use code BDGE. It'll get you a deposit bonus. It'll get you this free square. All right? We're out of here. Smoochies.